If you're not willing to sacrifice for your dreams, then you're sacrificing your dreams.
Meet Tonderai Chavhanga, a former Springbok Rugby player and the current CEO of the S Group. In this episode, he shares the challenges he faced throughout his career and provides insights for professional athletes to transition into the business world.
Everybody has got their role to play, and I think when everybody plays their role, that's when the team thrives.
What's one piece of advice you have for professional athletes who want to transition into the business world?
Treat it like it's your last contract and use your brand to put yourself in a position where
Tonderai, what do I need to know about your early childhood growing up in Zim for me to understand who you are?
I think very simple. I was raised by my grandma. So my mom had me when she was quite young. And I was raised by my grandma. My mom had to go and work. And, I was taught, I was always loved. I was very fortunate that my whole family, come from a pretty big family and everybody supports one another and loves one another. Of course, there's always fights every time there's some sort of a gathering, but everybody loves one another. And I was always taught, in fact, I saw through the way my grandma, my mom, my uncles, and my aunts lived, how they treated everybody the same, regardless of whether they've got a lot of money or they are poor. Everybody was always treated the same. And I was also taught the importance of keeping relationships, like starting and maintaining relationships. I think the importance of hard work. My father then passed away. I think I would have been about 11 or 12. And then my uncle, my late uncle Ernest, he then saw that I had some athletic potential and saw that I was going to be wasted if I was going to stay in the raw areas, and gave me an opportunity to live with him, put me in a Model C school. Learned how to speak English probably at about 11, 12 years old. And, really loved playing sport. And fortunately, my sporting ability sort of opened a lot of doors. But yeah, that's about it from my early childhood.
Mm. And you spoke about your uncle there that essentially gave you this opportunity. I think that is also so key, where other members of the family or community, if it's not a family member, step up and actually see that, that potential.
Yeah.
And I guess my question would be, how do you actually, cultivate more people to, take that initiative and step in and, help those individuals who they see potential in?
Yeah, look, for myself, I look at all different kinds of people, like whether it be the cleaners or even people on the street. And I always count myself very, very blessed in that it could have been me, it could have been anybody. But I was fortunate that somebody gave me that chance. And I think there are a lot of stories of similar routes where someone has been assisted by a family member or by a neighbor or by a stranger. But sadly, the need for those interventions is so great. And in as much as there are a lot of people doing it, there's just not enough because there are so many people that are struggling. But I think the more conversations like this can take place and people get to understand that, hey, this person is where they are because of the people that have lifted him up, the more hopefully that can encourage other people to say, well, maybe I can play a role in this person's life. Yeah.
Picking up the rugby ball for the first time, I think it was in grade 5, correct me if I'm wrong, grade 6.
Yeah.
And then, of course, going to a high school that was one of the best in Zim. At what point did you realize...
Correction, the best.
The best. Not one of the best, the best. Thanks for that correction. At what point did you realize that you can actually go pro?
I watched the 95 Rugby World Cup, and I was inspired by quite a number of things. And I think I've mentioned this before. I was inspired by, I saw Chester playing. He was not a necessarily big guy. He was a, slightly built guy, but he was quick. He was black. And to me, that I could see myself in him. I saw the absolute monster that was John Olomu. He was just a phenomenon. And bearing in mind, I didn't know anything about rugby. Well, at least I had very limited knowledge of rugby. And then the last thing that was quite significant for me was when South Africa won the World Cup, and how the late Madiba, how he united everybody. I think even as a young man, I could sort of understand just what an incredible moment that was for South Africa, for Africa and for the world, to seeing how this man who had every right to be bitter and everything that is negative that you can think of, used rugby to unite the nation. So to me, it really meant, or at least I saw it as, if this sport has the power to unite people, then I want to be part of that. So I was very fortunate that the following year, rugby was introduced to my school, and I started playing it, and I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, that's such a good point about, firstly, seeing people that, you see yourself in them.
Yeah.
Call them heroes. I think that as kids and that early childhood, we all need heroes, right? We all need people, if our parents are absent, perhaps, people that we can aspire to be, some sort, in the, call it, right direction. And, fast forward a bit, then getting your, call it, professional contract and going to the Cheetahs, what is that moment like for you? And could you maybe walk us through that journey of moving to South Africa?
Well, I think before that, I can say, so when I moved to Prince Edward, which was my high school, I was very fortunate that my first team coach was a guy called Ian Robertson. So now Ian Robertson was one of the only Springboks to have come out of Zim. Then it was Rhodesia. So the guys that had been Springboks that had come out of Zim were a guy called Dave Smith. I think majority of South Africans would remember Ray Mort, and obviously Ian Robertson. So I was very fortunate that Ian was our first team coach. So I also had that close thing of saying, hey, my coach actually played for the Springboks. And I made it my mission during the holidays, and whenever I got an opportunity, I would ask him for tips and do a little bit of extra stuff just so that I can put in as much work as I possibly could. So the intention was very much that I wanted to play professional rugby, and I started making certain sacrifices. Quite early on, I decided I was not going to drink and I was not going to do certain stuff. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with drinking, and I'm just saying that for myself. But I decided to cut certain stuff out of my life in order to put myself in a position where I could be professional.
How did you know to do that?
I just thought that, hey, I want to play professional rugby one day. And I remember even when I was in hostel at Prince Edward saying, I'm going to play for the Springboks one day. And, like, well, you're not a bad player, but hey, I don't know if you're that good to play for the Springboks. And it's funny. I was looking at something earlier, and it was a quote that basically said that if you're not willing to sacrifice for your dreams, then you're sacrificing your dreams. So, those sacrifices started early, and by the time, so you fast forward. So Ian is my first team coach. We were also fortunate to have been traveling to South Africa on tours. We would go to the St. John's Festival. We went to the Bishop's Festival. I remember the one year we played against Paul Boys, and Paul Boys is one of the powerhouses of South African schoolboy rugby, and we actually beat them. We had a really good side that year. The fact that we could compete against really good opposition, some of the top opposition in South Africa, and obviously having played Craven Week as well, where we were also competing against the best of the best. It also, I could measure myself up against the opposition and be like, well, I'm doing all right. I think I've got a shot here. So eventually when I got an opportunity to play when I got the bursary to go to the Free State, absolutely, I was ecstatic. I get to Bloemfontein and all the team meetings are in Afrikaans. I don't understand a single word of Afrikaans. But I must say, I was treated very well, always had an interpreter. I would sit next to a guy called Tim Wimble. You would always interpret in English. He was an English boy, but obviously could understand Afrikaans. So you would explain to me about the moves and what I was saying. But I had a lot of fun in Bloom. I wouldn't go back to Bloom, but I had a lot of fun.
That's so interesting. So do you think that it's still in Afrikaans, or do you think that it has progressed?
Look, I think Afrikaans is engraved in rugby, but I think a lot has changed. Just in terms of, I think rugby, the face of rugby has changed significantly, and Rassie that's like really Rassie's blueprint. I think so many coaches had that opportunity to do what Rassie has done. But I think what Rassie has just done is that he's just said, let's not talk about quotas. Let's just give everybody an opportunity to put their hand up, whether you're black or white or colored, whatever color you are. I mean, we've even got an Indian, a Springbok of Indian descent, which is amazing. But Rassie has simply just given everybody a fair shot, which is, I think, what should have been happening all along anyway. But now, because everybody has been given a fair shot and they've been found to have been more than good enough, we now have a Springbok side that is embraced by everybody. Even those, All Black supporters are now coming back to support the Springboks, because, I mean, this is 2 World Cups back to back. With a side that before you took over was struggling, and a side that is almost 50-50 in terms of the makeup of the racial makeup of the team, and nobody's talking about transformation anymore. Everybody just embraces the team for what they are. I mean, I'm looking at your thing there. Says together everyone achieves more. And it's really that same sort of Springbok mantra of together we can achieve.
And just on this point, why were, in your opinion,
stronger together?
Stronger together.
Yeah, stronger together.
In your opinion, why weren't previous coaches embracing this kind of philosophy, whereas like Rassie, just went for it?
I don't know. Look, I guess maybe it just wasn't the timing. I don't know if it's that there was a notion that players were not good enough, or because there was a certain quota that had to be met, the coaches just made sure that they picked just that amount of players. And maybe there was a lot more resistance to transformation, whereas, well, look, I can't speak for us. I can only see based on what is there, the evidence is that there was a sense of embracing transformation, as opposed to using it as a way of dividing us. But he embraced it, and it's been a wonderful thing to see. I mean, the way Sia has led the side. Oh man. He's a generational captain. I think we're going to be, in fact, you could somewhat say he's a statesman. That's the role that he plays. But it's not just him. It's Eben. It's Andre Pollard. It's Bongi Bonani. It's the whole team. Everybody has embraced this whole stronger together mantra.
And I know that we're skipping a bit here, but just on the Springboks. When you were part of the Springboks in 2005 and back then, what was the culture like then? Was it very similar to what it is now in terms of the mentality and this togetherness?
Look, I mean, it's difficult for me to say what the culture is now because I'm not in the setup. But I was very fortunate to have played under Jake White, and I mean Jake is just a phenomenal coach. He's a real visionary. And I mean, the culture was, there was a great culture. Everybody, well, certainly for myself, I always felt really embraced. And I met Jake when I was quite young, when I was still in school, and he kept tabs on me throughout my career, and I'm fortunate to still have a relationship with him, like over 20 years later.
Wow.
So, I mean, from a culture point of view, I think you'll find that majority of South African teams, the culture is very similar. I think the culture is very, very similar. It's very, very strong. Everybody is very sort of close together. Obviously, you always get little silos within the teams, and it happens everywhere.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know what the culture is like, but whatever the culture they've built, it's great, and they must keep it that way.
So, 11th June 2005 comes along.
11th June comes along. That day happens because of all the sacrifices that have come along the way. It comes because of someone in Jake White who was willing to take a chance on me and say, hey, I mean, he wrote me a letter the night before the game, just to say that he believed in me and that I must go out and go and do what I always do. But I think when you've got people that are backing you and that are in your corner, you're not only going to give it your best so that you do well, but so that you also don't let those people down. And look, I could, apart from being married and having my kids, there are not more memorable and more moments where I can feel like I was so proud and so privileged. So, yeah, that was a very, very special day. And that day still holds a very special place in my heart.
Yeah, and once more, such a good point on having people in your corner.
Yeah.
I mean, we were speaking about resilience before we started rolling, which is, there is no one person being resilient. It's collective, a support system around that individual. And I'm just glad that you were able to have that. You also, of course, broke the record in that game and, scored 6 tries. Were you ever driven based on personal accolades and wanting to essentially be this best rugby player throughout your career?
I think I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to touch back on what you were saying in terms of the support structure. I think one of the things that I love about rugby is, we talk about Ubuntu. as in I am because we are. And that's what rugby is about. So, I mean, I was always one of the smaller guys in the teams, and all the Buckies, Botas, and those guys are absolutely massive human beings. But the joy of rugby is that you've got 15 guys, now 23 because you play as a squad, and everybody brings something special to the table. So small guys like myself and the Cheslin Kobe's and those guys, we try and do whatever we can to make sure that we don't get tackled. But often we get the glory for scoring the tries, but you can't be scoring the tries without the forwards. The big guys have laid a foundation, and you can't get in the right attacking zones if the fly-halves and the scrum-halves don't pin the kicks back and put you in those right positions. So everybody, whether you're fat and slow or you're tall and whatever, everybody has got their role to play. And I think when everybody plays their role, that's when the team thrives. And I think that's a great thing about rugby. Of course, everybody brings in their special stuff. Like we spoke about Cheslin, the way he uses his footwork he's definitely one of the best in the world. In fact, he's the best in the world at doing that. So I think when you are the best that you can be in terms of your own sort of individual flair that you bring to the table, everybody else in the team would, and if everybody does that, then then the whole team thrives. But to cut a long story short, yes, I wanted to be the best. You can't have a dream of wanting to play for the Springboks without expecting yourself to be playing at the very best level. And I think but it's about playing your best within the system. Certain people, they shine, but if they are shining outside of the system, then the whole thing kind of like falters. So yeah, of course, I wanted to be the best that I could be.
I think that's such a good metaphor for life. Just backtracking something that you said, which is everyone has a role to play.
Yeah.
And, we always use these sport analogies to, and relate it to everyday life. But I think once more, it's the idea of we should be abundant. We should think that there's enough for everyone. And everyone does have a role to play. And through that collaborative team effort, I feel like we can all achieve what we want to achieve. Just like you said there, those 6 tries, yes, you were the one that touched the ball down, but to get the ball to you took a team effort and collectively 100%. As a team. And I think once more, that's this mentality of abundance as opposed to scarcity.
Yeah.
How does one person develop that and not think that if that person, gets the deal, that I'm not going to get the deal?
Look, I think my mentality is always that the cake is big enough for everybody. Just because things are not working out for me doesn't mean that it must work out for somebody else. If it works out for somebody else, well done. I'm going to cheer for you, and I'm going to continue, pushing through. I don't know. I think it's at times we can get fixated on just wanting it to be all about us and like me. Like in terms of what I do now, I always, when I'm putting a deal together, I don't look at what is best for me. I look at what is best for everybody involved, because I think when everyone feels they're getting their fair share, then it's a lot easier to make it happen. So yeah, it's just how I am.
Another question about your professional career. So you played for, a lot of clubs, from the Stormers to the Cheetahs to the Sharks. I even read that you played for a Welsh club.
Yeah, the Dragons.
The Dragons. So, was that a bit unsettling to move to, throughout your career, to not be perhaps in one location and be settled? And how did you adapt?
You know what? I am someone who loves change. Uh, if you were to ask me, would I have wanted to play for one club and one club only? I don't know if I would say yes. I think I have, because I've moved several times, because I moved several times to different places. I mean, I got to learn and understand about different cultures and about how different. There was always something that I could learn from the place that I was at, and I loved that. Um, yeah, I think I am someone who embraces change. Try to make a concerted effort of making the most of everywhere that I went, even in Johannesburg, which is not the easiest place to live. Uh, but yeah, really, I mean, even when I moved to Wales, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I think moving to Wales was probably the best thing that happened to me because by the time I went to the Lions, I was not really enjoying rugby anymore. So going to Wales gave me a fresh start. Um, Great coach, great teammates. You know, the fans were just amazing. Not big crowds, but you really felt like. I mean, I think the stadium was probably a capacity of about 5,000, 6,000, but you felt like you had 50,000. You know, that's how they made you feel, and the people loved their rugby. Yeah, it was just a great place to live, and I was fortunate to have taken my family with me, and you know, we traveled on this incredible journey together.
I think something that I heard you speak about before was the difficulty of then transitioning out of rugby.
Yeah.
And you said something so profound that stuck with me, which is you, and I'm paraphrasing, you are not rugby. You love rugby, but you are not rugby, and rugby is not everything. What did you mean by that?
I think that can be used for anything, right? So it's so important to differentiate between what you do and who you are. So I was very fortunate from an early age. I think probably because of the injuries, the amount of injuries that I had experienced, that I knew that it was just a matter of time before rugby, was going to come to an end. Obviously, I mean, I gave it my absolute best every single time. But I needed to differentiate, to compartmentalize the two. And when rugby finished and I hung up my boots, I didn't have the issue of having to discover who I was. I knew that I'm Tonderai Chavhanga. I am husband to a beautiful wife, and I'm father to two adorable kids. That was the most important thing. And then tried to figure things out, post rugby career. I mean, I had these ideas of what I was going to be doing, and actually plans, not just ideas. I had plans of what I was going to be doing after my rugby career was finished. But things just didn't work out. Walked into so many doors, but I was not going home with the bacon. I was not going home with the bacon. And I think rugby did so much for me. But one of the things that I was able to get through rugby was, you build a little bit of a brand for yourself where people recognize you. You build relationships. So when it comes to you've got a business opportunity or you've got an idea that you would like to propose to a CEO or somebody, a decision maker, it's not hard to pick up the call and say, hey, dude, listen, I want to meet with you about this. You get there, you do your presentation, blah, blah, blah. And that was never hard for me. The challenge, I think, I hadn't learned how to monetize like all the opportunities that were coming. And as a result, I spent probably 3-4 years where, we did not have a stable income. Things were tough, like tough. And it took a long time to get to that stage where you can actually start monetizing on various opportunities. But one of the many things that rugby taught me was, I think playing Super Rugby especially, or playing Test Rugby, was that each week is different. One week, I'll never forget, we played against the Blues. That was like basically my breakout game. Played against the Blues, and the Blues had a super side. They had a really, really good side with Carlos Spencer playing at his best, Joe Rokothoko. There was a lot of All Blacks in that side. And we beat them quite convincingly, and we were on a high. I think that was probably the biggest defeat that the Blues had ever gotten in their history. The following week, we go and play against the Chiefs. The Chiefs, they were a decent side, but they were not like great. Man, we got embarrassed. It was bad. It was really bad. But my point is this, that I also realized early on that each week is different. Just because you win one week does not necessarily mean that it's an automatic win for you next week. And just because you lose the following week does not mean that you have to continue losing. And also through my injuries, I was also always challenging mentally to not keep myself like in that space where, like, because things are not working well, I must now be down in the dumps and mentally and stuff. So the fact that I had learned the ability to just have that bounce back effect of, hey, things are not going well. I remember each and every like Christmas and towards the end of the year, I was thinking to myself, next year is going to be a great year. Things are going to happen next year. So I've always had that positive mindset to things, that even when things looked the worst, but I was always like, things are going to work out and just have to keep on pushing. And, that perseverance, it paid off.
Mm. You mentioned there that there were some mental challenges with perhaps being injury prone. How did you not let that affect you when you were playing?
Look, it was tough, because it always seemed as if just when I got some momentum, like for example, got selected for the Springboks, scored those 6 tries, and then got injured, couldn't play the following week. And that basically set me back, was out of the mix again. And I can think of so many instances where I was just getting my stripes going, and then boom, injury hits and you're out again. You're having to rebuild you're obviously having to rebuild yourself, rebuild your confidence, and everything. But once again, my mentality has always been that it's going to get better. Tomorrow is nog 'n dag. Tomorrow is another day, and things are going to be good. So, I mean, obviously, I had to really constantly tell myself, and I think my faith has also played a massive role in that I have always known that there's a much bigger purpose to my life than just playing rugby, than just doing certain stuff. But I always knew that for me, rugby has always been a vehicle has been a platform for me to be able to represent God. Now, having said that, I'm by far not a perfect person. My wife would tell you that. Make lots of mistakes, but my faith also played a massive role. Even during the tough times, I always knew that you are your fuel tank is running low, and there's you don't have money to refill it. But like, hey, something good is going to happen. We're going to make it. We're going to make it. We're going to make it. And yeah, so that mental side is been there in that I'm naturally a positive person, but more so, I always knew that Jesus got my back. So that gave me confidence to just continue going.
And going through that, transition period, expecting, or sorry, the better word to have is you had these plans, and now, retirement comes, hard times come. How did you get yourself out of that to essentially, build yourself to where you are now?
So once again, it's through relationships. I was very fortunate. I had a friend. I've got a friend who eventually introduced me to Rob Hersov. And through that relationship with Rob, I remember when I met Rob and I was telling him about, I was really like sort of down and out. And I'm not really the kind of person that, you just tell anybody, never mind a total stranger, that, hey, listen, dude, things ain't good here. But Rob was he's just an incredible human being. He gave me opportunities, and built a really good relationship with him. Ended up establishing the S Group, which he had already started this networking group called the Smart Bees. But from there, we then started the S Group, which was more business focused. And through the network, so many opportunities have come. We're very careful to shield our kids from the struggles that we were facing. They obviously knew that something was not right, but they didn't know to what extent things were not right. But my wife really held me down. We never had any fights about finances or anything like that. And sadly, a lot of professional, not just rugby players, but sports athletes, people in the entertainment industry, their divorce rates post their careers is very, very high. But I've really been blessed that I've got such an amazing wife who's just been supportive. And it has made the toughest of times like quite easy, to be honest. And as I was saying earlier, so it's a very simple business. It's actually a WhatsApp-based business. So we've got over 60 different WhatsApp groups for our members, whether it be sector-based groups, so like your guys that are in the hospitality industry are in their groups, energy, agri. Then we've got your geolocation groups, so South African groups, Cape Town, Joburg, Durban. We've got international groups, the European groups, London, the US. But the whole thing is just about bringing people together, and in order for people to find mutually beneficial synergies, opportunities. And it's also helping each other beyond just business. There's so many things that happen in the network that are not business related at all, but people are just paying the goodness forward, which is one of the mantras that Rob Hersov is always sort of mentioning, that you've got to pay the goodness forward. And you don't even have to expect something in return. Obviously, being a business networking organization, it's not like to say that you're just doing things, it's like you're just doing things for charity. But there is a lot of stuff that happens where people are just being good to one another, and it's great to see. But we've also got a consulting business where we are doing multiple things, from deal facilitation, stakeholder engagement, and logistics as well, rail logistics specifically. But I'll say it again, everything is very much to do with relationships. I have been able to do a lot of things that I'm doing now that I frankly had zero clue of how to do them. But because of those relationships, I was, really given grace to learn and to understand the different industries, and ending up putting myself in a position where I can actually properly consult. So I think that's the other thing also is like one has got to be willing to learn. It's one thing to have access, but access is only going to open the door for you. But after that, people are going to actually want to know, okay, what do you actually have to offer? Otherwise, it's just going to be a nice cup of coffee and nice knowing you. We'll see you again next time, buddy. So yeah.
And just on that relationship part, what have you noticed is a few key points to foster quality relationships?
I think just being genuine. Because people can see if someone has got an agenda, it's quite easy to pick up.
Inauthentic.
Yeah. You just got to be authentic and genuine. And I would say also a lot of giving. I would say majority of the stuff that I do is just to help. How can I help you? Or you see someone that is in need of a contact somewhere. Like, okay, cool, no worries, I'll connect you guys. You see someone that is looking for to procure certain stuff. Don't worry, I'll connect you to this person, and you don't even have to make any money from that. But you're just being helpful and being authentic, and because when the time comes when you need something, it's not to say that you are sort of holding something over the people because you've helped them, but it becomes easier to just also get help when you need it. But for me, I just think fostering those relationships is just about being authentic, being genuine in what you do.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's that unconditional giving.
Yeah.
And not expecting anything in return.
Yeah.
And like you said, somewhere down the line, even though you weren't expecting it,
it's going to come back.
It's going to be easy to ask that person because you have the relationship now and they know who you are at your core and not just front you're trying to put up.
100%.
I think that's what I've noticed is that there's a lot of expectations when you give and conditional giving, which perhaps is not going to get you very far. I like to think of, our life in general as like different stages. So, for example, 0 to 20, it's development. You're figuring out a lot. You're learning. Perhaps the next 10 years is, we're continuously learning, but the next 10 years is perhaps figuring out more about who you are as a person. And perhaps the next 10 years is maybe establishing yourself for something for the next 20 years of your life, right? This stage of your life, what drives you?
I think this stage of my life, what is driving me is that I want, and I would say we, my wife and I, we want our kids to have much better lives than we did. We are fortunate to have put them in that position. But more than that, I think it's about scaling what we have now so that it's not you don't find yourself back to that dark place that was there a number of years ago. But I think the stage that we are in at the moment is about scaling, about building on top of what we already have, and just we really try and make our kids understand the privilege that they have, because when I was looking at those stats of the different income brackets in South Africa, and it is absolutely shocking to see how many people are living how many people are living on as little as like 10,000 rand a month. And those people are supporting multiple family members.
It's not just for them.
It's not just for them. It's insane. So, and also just sharing with our kids that, hey, listen, we didn't come for money. I had to walk to school for a long time. Look, I would say I was very fortunate in that, even though I would say I didn't come for money, but I never went to sleep hungry. I never walked barefoot. I was very fortunate because, my family members were educated, and because they were educated, their jobs, and they could send money back to my grandma and obviously to me. And my dad also did his part in making sure that I was fine. But the fact is, I had to walk to school. We had no electricity, no water, no electricity, no running water, and all this kind of stuff, like proper rural life. And now, our kids find themselves where, going to Nando's and fancy restaurants, it's kind of like a norm, and you start thinking that it's a given that you have that. We try and make sure that our kids are not like ridiculously spoiled to the point where they think that everything is just a given. You've got to work hard for everything that you have.
And is it as easy as just sharing these lessons with them, or perhaps is it chores that you're giving them? What are you saying to your kids?
We try to balance. I'm probably a little bit more on the preachy side, to be honest, because I think the kids get tired of me telling them just how privileged they are and how I had to suffer. We do try to give them some chores to do around the house. So I think it's a fine balance, and also I also have to check myself that I'm not being too preachy and just telling them about how hard life was, because at the end of the day, we are doing it for them anyway, so that they don't have to go through what we went through.
That's a good point. And also, you can't be saying one thing and then you're also having a Nando's burger. Tonderai, this has been great. Thank you for this chat. The last part of the conversation is called the fast fire.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you questions.
You didn't tell me about that. But fire on.
I'm going to ask you questions that requires a word or a sentence.
Okay.
What's one piece of advice you have for professional athletes who want to transition into the business world post-career?
Start as soon as you get a contract. Like, as soon as you get contracted, treat it like it's your last contract, and use your brand to put yourself in a position where you know that after your career is finished, you can go into something. You don't need to be an academic. It helps, but you don't need to be. I think a lot of business leaders and decision makers love rugby and want to be associated with rugby and the rugby players. So use that to your advantage.
Build that personal brand. I like it.
Yeah.
What's one thing you would say to young 18-year-old Tonderai right now?
I think I probably would have continued with my studies.
Interesting. What would you have studied?
I had enrolled BCom marketing. I think I would have continued with my studies. Yeah.
Fast forward, looking back, what's the impact that you would be proud of making?
The fact that I was able to play for the Springboks. As a rural boy from Zimbabwe, who frankly should not have had anything to do with the Springboks. But the fact that I was able to put on that jersey should be inspirational enough for South Africans, young Zimbabweans, young Africans, to really believe that they can achieve whatever they want to achieve if they just put their minds to. So they must, that going back to that thing there that we spoke about in terms of sacrifice, that you should be willing to sacrifice your dream, otherwise you should be willing to sacrifice for your dream, otherwise you're sacrificing your dream. So I think that's it. That the fact that I could play for the Springboks, anybody can achieve whatever. They might not necessarily be Springbok itself, but you can be a Springbok at life, at whatever it is that you choose to do.
Springbok at life, I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you. This was super insightful. Thank you for the impact that you're making and the wisdom that you shared with us today. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, and all the very best to your show. May it continue growing, and your business as well. And as you work with your significant other.
Thanks, Tonderai.